Thank you, Senator Hirono. You know, when we talk about all of the smart technology, I think we're also reminded that sometimes the weakest link here is us, the operators here. And Mr. Greneau, you mentioned in your written testimony that in a survey on many of the public buildings in Alaska, a large number of the buildings actually had advanced or control systems that were deliberately rendered inoperable by facility personnel. Talk to me a little bit about the human factor here. I think we recognize that oftentimes we do have some pretty decent systems that could help us, but because we want to override that system, because sometimes we don't understand the full benefits that that system can provide, that many times in Alaska, I think we have folks coming in from the outside, install something, leave it without the appropriate training to the local people. Share a little bit with the committee here, because it's not just in Alaska, it's all over, where we have systems that can allow us to do better, but we're not as smart as our systems. Talk to me a little bit about the situation.
Thank you for the question. I think that this applies not just to the building automation systems in schools and big buildings, but also even at home. We've walked into plenty of homes where the ventilation systems are disabled because people just don't understand it. And a lot of times the decisions, at least on public buildings, the decisions to incorporate and adopt these building automation systems come from the top. And the message and the importance of it doesn't always trickle down to the person who's actually having to push the buttons and monitor it and maintain it. And in many cases, those folks are there for a job, and maintaining the building automation system is just a small part of what they have to do. And so if they don't really understand the importance of it, then they're going to prioritize it at a lesser level. And in some cases, we did see where they just were completely disabled in that survey from 2012. And again, in homes, it's the same thing. Ventilation systems are often just unplugged, and it has to do with people just not understanding why they're there.
How do we do a better job? How do we make sure that either as the homeowner, you know and understand what it is that you have in your home, or from a broader systems perspective, that the training is more than adequate?
Wow, I mean, that's a big question. I mean, in the communities, our approach is to go to the communities first and say, hey, here's this project we're doing. We want your buy-in, we want your feedback, we want your input. And so for us to, give a chance to incorporate traditional wisdom with 21st century technology, that is one of the ways we're able to do this in the villages. When it comes to just building automation systems on the bigger scale and the commercial scale, it's just a matter of, I think, really training and having exposure for the people who are operating those systems, and getting that, maybe it's through continuing education, maybe it's through, I don't know what the directions or the answers are for getting them that information, but it needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. It needs to be addressed.
Let me ask you, Ms. Hawkins-West, because you're trying to do this on a community or neighborhood there in Birmingham. What are the hardships here, just in terms of the education or the training? What are you encountering?
I think it's everything that Bruno is saying, but I think that with the research we're about to undertake, where we will have control of the water heaters and can use them as energy storage devices with the customers being able to override, we're trying to figure out how much interaction the utility should play to optimize. And can the utility have a role in trying to optimize at least the larger, the HVAC and the water heaters in homes, and then let the homeowners deal with a lot of the other things. So
well, how difficult is that? Because I like to be able to control my thermostat. And I don't want somebody to tell me what, the temperature of my hot water is going to be, and particularly if I think that somebody's doing it downtown. Is this, as a societal thing, is this just something that we're going to have to get over in order to gain these efficiencies? And I'll ask Mr. Wallace to join the conversation here too, because from a big commercial perspective, one of the things that drives me crazy here, it gets so cold in this committee room and we can't control it.
So I'll just continue. We will always allow the customer to have the last choice.
Okay,
So
I
if they
like
want
that.
to override it, we will offer them cost incentives to let us do that. And so we might preheat your hot water, so you still have hot water. It's just we might shift the peak for everybody and heat it early. So
Mr. Emerson, or Mr. Wallace?
And I would agree. I think one of the challenges, I think you put a very good point about that. We've seen, and many times people install building automation systems and they tune them and get them really optimized when they are first installed. But over time, as work needs to be done or technicians are in adjusting things, they don't really necessarily understand the impact to the overall system. So it can degrade over time. We have programs where we've saved one of our clients over $7 million in energy savings over 3 years by remotely checking and monitoring and making sure that those erosions are not happening on that. So I think there's really a couple parts to it. One of them is taking advantage of the new technologies, IoT, remote monitoring services, as well as really as a manufacturer, making sure that we're designing products that are simple to use. They're not really complicated, because I think that's a large part of it as well. The usability of that system shouldn't be complicated, and somebody shouldn't need to have to worry about a lot of things in order to use the system itself.
Senator Hirono, did you have any more questions that you wanted to field?
I'm with you, Mr. Wallace, and in terms of if the system is too complicated, then there will be erosion, and even in our own homes. I mean, I have an HVAC thing, I don't even touch it, it's like something bad might happen. Or I think you have a lot of customers like that, Ms. Wallace, who, once the system is turned on, my hot water, I also don't touch that thermostat either. It's like, it's there, it's working, that's all I care about. If anything goes wrong, I have no idea. So, we're living in an age where the user-friendliness of all of these products is very critical, I would say. Thank you.
Just a couple last questions here, and this one is directed to you, Mr. Wallace. I was a little bit surprised when you stated in your written testimony that refrigeration accounts for a bigger chunk of a typical retail building's energy consumption than either HVAC or lighting. That one surprised me. So given that, what are the issues that you are dealing with R&D, energy technology, innovation, the building automation systems in general, as it relates to the refrigeration piece?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And yes, refrigeration, it is a surprise, but depending on the type of building, refrigeration can be the largest part of it. And the other part of it as well is refrigeration is a base load. So refrigeration needs to be on to keep your food at the proper temperatures regardless of the time of day. So we've invested a lot of R&D in terms of how to build more efficient refrigeration systems, from compression technologies to smarter control algorithms that are able to use advanced sensors to look at the actual conditions now and adjust the capacity of the system as well. So those are all from an equipment level standpoint too, but we've also noticed, and I think it's a fact, that in many installations there could be some mechanical problem that is causing a degradation of the equipment itself. So in other words, it's still keeping, if you go to your local grocery store, it's still keeping the food cold, but there's something that's just not right in that system, and it's operating inefficiently, but it's being masked because of that. So one of the areas that we're focused on is using new sensors, new technologies, many things, as Dr. Vernon has talked about as well, to pull that data out and to run analytics and machine learning on top of that data to understand, is that system really operating as efficiently as it should be? It was installed one way, is it really operating that way? And I think combining those pieces together are part of the key going forward in terms of managing those systems more efficiently and understanding when something really has a problem and addressing it.
Mr. Simmons, did you want to jump in there?
Sure. One of, I think, kind of exciting piece of research that the Department of Energy has been working on, especially with Oak Ridge, is on essentially solid-state refrigeration. That's obviously essentially sci-fi, but then again, LED lights could be seen as kind of something out there, and yet here they are lighting this room. But that type of next-generation technology for refrigeration is some of the research that we're doing, and is particularly happening at Oak Ridge. Just wanted to put that in.
If I could add on to that, Senator,
Burden.
I think it's so important about the automation and the simplicity and the transparency of technologies and the system of technologies that would go into buildings, and the workforce that can install these systems and adequately train all of us to be able to operate them. And the analogy I think about, where I hope we'll get to with buildings, is our vehicles. So, our vehicles are, have a lot of computational horsepower, a lot of sensors on them. They're GPS tracked. Soon they'll drive themselves, and we're all going to be very comfortable with that. I hope they're cyber secure. They're going to be the most expensive 20 square foot room that you could find, and we can do all the temperature control. But when we walk into our car each day, it's turnkey, and we expect it to work. And when something goes wrong, it comes up, and then we take it to somebody to maintain it if we don't change the oil. We need to get our buildings to that point where it's automated, it's turnkey, problems, diagnostics are run, they either fix themselves or the right maintenance crew comes in and they're optimized, so a room like this isn't cold.
Well, you've given me a good segue to my last question, which was the role that electronic vehicles can play connecting with the issue of smart buildings. We're going to be at that point where we're going to see an increased need for charging at night when everyone's at home, and as you look to the variable loads, the variable supplies, these smart controllers that are going to be aiding our buildings to be more efficient. How do you see electronic vehicles or electric vehicles playing into all this? How long before these vehicles really are viewed as our mobile storage devices? It sounds like you think that there is a very key and a very integrated role here, but I'm curious to know from the others as well. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know exactly when they're going to be ubiquitous, but their growth is happening. The battery costs are coming down. They're becoming more affordable, so there's going to be more and more electric vehicles that are going to come out into the market. But what's, for me, is really interesting when we think about smart buildings is our buildings may be generating power, through PV. They may be storing power through vehicles plugged in at night or other energy storage technologies. They're going to be responding, to grid signals to reduce loads. So the entire operation of a building is going to change. And the electric vehicles is going to be really interesting when you link it back to the grid. We did a study about 10 years ago of how many electric vehicles could you put on the transmission infrastructure of the grid. In some parts of the country, you could put 100% of the light-duty vehicle fleet on the grid. That's a good thing from an electric vehicle point of view. Now your grid's running 95% all the time, as it provides that electricity to the vehicles that are charging in the middle of the night. On the West Coast, it's a much smaller amount because we have a lot more renewables and hydros. So the bottom line, it's going to change the dynamics of it considerably when electric vehicles start plugging into buildings or homes and we start managing that in large numbers.
And
Simmons.
there is obviously this is a very important area of research, and we are working with a number of the national labs on this, with Idaho National Lab, Oak Ridge, PNNL, because not only are you talking about possible two-way flows from the residents into the cars and back again, but with research that we're doing on extreme fast charging to be able to charge those cars very quickly, that uses an incredible amount of electricity in a short period of time. I think, don't quote me on this. I thought from if I remember the numbers correctly, for just 3 vehicles, they'd be drawing 1 megawatt for a short period of time. That is a lot of electricity, and which this is some of the important work that we're doing in trying to figure out how to make that work, number one, for the vehicles themselves, for the batteries, so that we can recharge batteries quickly. But then to look at, from an overall perspective, what does this mean? What does this mean for the grid, and to try to look at what those implications are. So there's a lot of research going on, obviously, because of the massive changes we're seeing in vehicles and the energy space right now.
Ms. Hawkins-West, are you factoring EVs into your smart neighborhoods?
In this phase, we're not, but we fully intend future phases. We'd love to see EVs, and it's a very important part of our research program. So another piece of the equation.
And as far as Alaska goes, I always say places like Juneau, Island, operating off of hydro, Sitka, hydro, Island, perfect for EVs. We just need to get more of them up there.
Agreed.
Yeah. Mr. Wallace, care to comment?
No, that's really outside my area of expertise just a bit, but I do believe that that does play into the overall idea of how you manage the grid and how that the building loads can be shifted up and down based upon some of the changes to the grid from EVs and other areas as well.
Good. Very interesting. Well, thank you all for your testimony this morning, your contributions in many different ways. It's been interesting, and I think we recognize that when it comes to efficiency opportunities, we have a great deal within our buildings and our homes. So thank you for your time this morning, and with that, we stand adjourned.